Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with a gruesome murder taking place in Japan's most famous red light district. The victim was found lying in a pool of blood, but her body was nowhere to be seen. Apart from her clothes, shoes, and strands of hair, there was no trace of her remains or hormones. It was as if the perpetrator wasn't human, but some elusive, supernatural entity. The police identified the victim through her ID card. She is a 25-year-old bar owner. Based on the coagulation of the blood, the estimated time of death was between 2 and 3 a.m. Beyond that, there were no useful clues. The police chief felt his head spinning upon hearing the details. But what shocked him the most was that the first person to discover the crime scene was, yet again, a YouTuber named Matsumiya. This was already the third murder he had come across, each victim someone he knew. When questioned, Matsumiya insisted he had nothing to do with it. According to him, it was the bar owner who had reached out to him first, claiming she was being stalked by a Hiruko. Worried for her safety, he had come to check on her. In ancient Japanese texts, a couple deities are said to have created the land of Japan and its guardian gods. Hiruko, however, was their firstborn, a tragic god of misfortune. Rejected by his parents, he was abandoned at sea on a reed boat. Legends say that when Hiruko takes a life, all that remains at the scene are a pool of blood, scattered clothing, and strands of hair, almost as if the victim had vanished into thin air. Over the past few months, a series of eerily similar murders had taken place, 8 in total. At first, they occurred once a month, but the frequency had been steadily increasing. Matsumiya had witnessed the 6th, 7th, and 8th cases. What made these murders even more disturbing was that after each one, Hiruko would release a statement, openly declaring its crimes. Surprisingly, this so-called god seemed unusually candid. However, to the police chief, a staunch atheist, such claims were nothing more than utter nonsense. But just as they were discussing the case, Matsumiya's behavior suddenly turned bizarre. His intense reaction startled everyone present. The officers followed his gaze but found nothing. The surrounding crowd, seeing the commotion, immediately pulled out their phones and began filming. Realizing he was being recorded, Matsumiya started screaming frantically, claiming that Hiruko had appeared. A scene straight out of a horror film was now unfolding in real life, sending waves of terror through the public. The media soon dubbed the case the Divine Vanishing Murders and even produced special coverage on the phenomenon. Discussions about Hiruko exploded online. As these incidents continued, many young people began to believe they were indeed witnessing the work of a god. Some even started worshipping Hiruko, while public trust in the police plummeted. Faced with mounting pressure, the Japanese cabinet turned to an organization known as the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Rumored to be the oldest investigative agency in the world, dating back to the Yamato period, its primary mission was to investigate supernatural occurrences, especially those that defied scientific explanation like Hiruko. Under the cabinet's directive, the chief accepted the mission. Given their limited manpower, they requested additional support from the Metropolitan Police Department. Assigned to the case was a police officer named Ameno, who was to work alongside the Resolution Office's acting director, Miyabi. However, Ameno was utterly baffled by the decision. She was a ceremonial guard from the General Affairs Division with no investigative experience whatsoever. Why would she be placed in such a high-level department? Upon hearing her concerns, the police chief and Miyabi merely exchanged knowing smiles and said, "It's a matter of natural talent." It seemed that sometimes innate ability far outweighed effort. From the moment Ameno set foot in the Metropolitan Police Department, she could feel the cold stares of rejection. But regardless of how unwelcome she was, the case had to be investigated. The police chief briefed her and Miyabi on the current progress. Their primary suspect was none other than the YouTuber Matsumiya. The last 3 victims of the Hiruko murders all had some form of romantic relationship with him. The first was an online shop owner. At the time of the investigation, Matsumiya had been adamant that the case was a divine vanishing, speaking about it with an unsettling level of conviction. He later gained viral attention by sharing the story in his live streams, turning him into an internet sensation overnight. 4 days after the first incident, another victim, a young nurse, was found near the original crime scene. 3 consecutive victims, all women closely connected to Matsumiya. There was no way this was just a coincidence. And yet, the most baffling part was that he had a solid alibi. When the bar owner reached out to him for help, he had been in his YouTube office, with surveillance footage confirming his presence. Ever since the murders began, Matsumiya's online presence has revolved entirely around Hiruko, under the pretense of keeping the public informed. His YouTube live streams now easily attract an audience of 3 million viewers, prompting the officers to scoff. Matsumiya had finally achieved the fame he always wanted. It turned out that before all this, Matsumiya had been an underground idol, relying on his good looks to cultivate a devoted following of female fans. Behind the scenes, he engaged in secret relationships with them to make money. The 3 murdered women were among his most obsessed admirers, so devoted that they were willing to give him everything, even their lives. In other words, Matsumiya had a strong motive for murder. As for his airtight alibi, the only plausible explanation was that he had an accomplice. Miyabi agreed with this theory, but dismissed the idea that the accomplice was Hiruko. Instead, he suggested it was something called a shadow figure, a mysterious entity that could be captured by surveillance cameras but was impossible to describe in human terms. Legend had it that this being had a habit of cutting victims' hair when it killed. This detail matched the crime scenes perfectly, and similar shadowy figures had been spotted in the footage near all 3 locations. The police chief was speechless since they were just investigating a murder rather than hunting spirits. But then again, the Resolution Office had always specialized in the supernatural, and Miyabi wasn't part of the police force. He was eager to prove that ghosts and demons were real and had an extensive knowledge of folklore. However, the police weren't about to let him have the last word. Since Hiruko's rise to infamy, a wave of copycats had emerged across Japan. Some bloggers discovered that wearing a black cloak and spraying themselves with a specialized pixelation mist made them appear invisible on camera. In other words, all those shadowy figures in the crime scene footage could have been faked. Hiruko might not exist at all. Miyabi stubbornly refuted this, insisting that the possibility of a real shadow figure couldn't be ruled out. The growing divide between the Resolution Office and the police became impossible to ignore. The next day, Miyabi and Amino visited Matsumiya's residence. The moment his manager saw them, he frowned in irritation, saying that Matsumiya had already been questioned multiple times. His mental state was on the verge of collapse. For his sake, the manager asked them to leave, but Miyabi blocked the door from closing. He had already investigated the manager and knew that before all this, the man had hardly paid Matsumiya any attention. It was only when the scandal skyrocketed Matsumiya's fame that he suddenly started treating him like a golden goose. In the end, it was all about money. Sensing the tension, a woman stepped in and invited them inside. She was Matsumiya's wife, though, given his career depended on attracting female fans, their marriage was a well-kept secret. During their conversation, Miyabi quickly noticed that she was an exceptionally devoted wife. Not only did she willingly stay behind the scenes to support him, but she also personally handled his styling and makeup. What was even more astonishing was that, out of love, she had accepted his romantic entanglements with fans. As long as Matsumiya's heart ultimately belonged to her, she didn't care. Inside the room, Miyabi finally met Matsumiya himself. He immediately noticed the YouTuber's in-depth knowledge of Hiruko. To increase his chances of spotting the entity, Matsumiya had even started wearing a specially designed pair of sunglasses crafted by none other than his wife. Matsumiya claimed that Hiruko was targeting him for a reason. It was jealous of his popularity, and that's why it was going after his fans. Just then, the police chief called. The bodies of the first 2 victims had been found. The group immediately rushed to the scene. The moment Matsumiya laid eyes on the corpses, his face turned deathly pale. Ameno, experiencing such a gruesome sight for the first time, staggered to the side and vomited her stomach out. But before she could catch her breath, something dark lunged toward her. Startled, she looked closer, only to realize it was a girl. Before she could process what was happening, a delivery man suddenly appeared in front of her. This delivery man was an unofficial member of the Resolution Office, responsible for transporting documents. No matter how far, he always made his deliveries. This time, he had brought files on Matsumiya's manager. As they flipped through the records, one detail stood out. The manager had recently been arranging fake passports. At the subsequent case briefing, Miyabi had Amino present the Resolution Office's official deduction. Amino theorized that the manager was the mastermind behind the entire scheme. He had been using Matsumiya to scam money and was now planning to flee the country. Of course, such an ordinary, non-paranormal explanation was entirely out of sync with the Resolution Office's style. Without hesitation, Miyabi publicly rejected her conclusion. At that moment, a police officer rushed in with breaking news. Matsumiya's wife and manager were currently live streaming. They were advising the public to wear sunglasses for safety safety reasons, a thinly veiled attempt at selling their product. Then, the wife made a shocking announcement. She and Matsumiya were married. She claimed that, as his legal wife, she wanted to clear his name. She declared Matsumiya didn't lie and Hiruko was real. The moment he heard this, Miyabi's expression darkened. Something was very wrong. If the killer was truly someone who resented Matsumiya's female fans, then his wife had just painted a target on her own back. Meanwhile, at home watching the live stream, Matsumiya suddenly grabbed a knife and rushed out. His wife, having just finished her promotional segment, walked home calmly, unaware of the danger closing in on her. Just as a dark figure lunged at her, Matsumiya arrived in time to intervene. But instead of comforting his wife using his tongue, he frantically tried to calm the shadowy figure using his muscles, going as far as suggesting they run away together. His wife stood frozen in shock. The figure hesitated, seemingly swayed by Matsumiya's words, and finally dropped the knife. At that moment, Miyabi and Amino arrived at the scene. With no room left for pretense, Matsumiya came clean. He admitted that he had orchestrated this entire scheme just to gain fame. He then threatened them, demanding to be let go. But Miyabi was quick and skillful, subduing his chicken strength with ease. Now came the moment of truth, the unmasking of the shadowy figure. It was none other than the bar owner, the third victim. Everything clicked into place. Matsumiya's horrified reaction upon seeing the first two corpses wasn't because of the gruesomeness, it was because he recognized them. The so-called Hiruko case had been a carefully crafted scheme by his most devoted fans to boost his fame. They had noticed that Matsumiya's channel had exploded in popularity due to Hiruko-related content, so they took it a step further, staging their own disappearances to fuel the hype. One of the women, a nurse, had used her medical knowledge to store their blood in advance and staged crime scenes mimicking divine vanishing cases. The shadowy figure caught on surveillance was just a trick using pixelation mist spray. In the original plan, no one was supposed to die. The problem was the bar owner. As she deepened her relationship with Matsumiya, her mindset shifted. She no longer saw herself as just a cog in the scheme. She wanted to be the one who loved Matsumiya the most. So, at locations where she had once shared dates with him, she personally eliminated the other two women. Now, she had finally secured her place as the most devoted fan in the world. But Miyabi's next words wiped the smug smile off her face. He said her love for her idol didn't even compare to theirs. He explained that the real Hiruko victims vanished without a trace, leaving behind only their clothes, accessories, anything that wasn't part of their physical body. Even something as small as colored contact lenses or manicured nails remained intact. The first two crime scenes had been meticulously staged, down to their abandoned contact lenses. But there were no discarded nails in the bar owner's scene. She had been sloppy. Her actions weren't about devotion, they were about selfish desire. Furious, the bar owner grabbed the knife and lunged at Matsumiya's wife. But Ameno, her martial arts skills now coming in handy, swiftly intercepted and subdued her sexy body. And with that, the case was closed. Even the police had to admit, the resolution office was damn good at what they did. Afterward, Miyabi approached Matsumiya's wife. He bluntly told her that she was the true mastermind. The three obsessed fans hadn't acted on their own, they had simply followed her lead. Despite what she had claimed, that she only cared about being Matsumiya's one true love, her possessiveness had driven her to manipulate the situation. And yet, legally, there was nothing she could be charged with. On the way back, Ameno hesitantly admitted that creatures like Hiruko might actually exist. Not because of Matsumiya's claims, but because she herself had once seen a shadowy figure, something that defied all logic. Miyabi, both amused and relieved by her change in perspective, advised her to stay level-headed. If she wanted to work at the resolution office, she needed to learn to face the unknown without fear. As Ameno reflected on his words, the girl from before appeared again. This time, she got a clear look at her face. As the girl passed by, Ameno felt the air around her distort, as if space itself had twisted. Not long after the case ended, a all-girls high school was struck by a bizarre phenomenon. 17 students fell into a coma simultaneously. Hiruko soon issued a public statement, claiming responsibility for the incident. Panic spread once again. Given their previous success, it was only natural that the authorities turned to the resolution office for help. According to school records, similar coma episodes had been occurring for over a month. In fact, nearly 70% of the students had experienced it at least once. The strangest part is that every affected student was perfectly healthy, and the moment they left the school grounds, their symptoms disappeared. This could only mean one thing. The school itself was the source of the the anomaly. Miyabi and Ameno arrived to begin their investigation. To help them understand the situation, the principal called a student named May. While the three of them talked, a biology teacher stood outside the door eavesdropping. The moment Miyabi noticed him, the teacher quickly retreated into his office. It didn't take a genius to figure out. He was definitely involved. Miyabi's attention was then drawn to a small memorial set up in front of the school building. Bouquets of flowers and offerings lay neatly arranged at the site. Curious, he asked May who they were meant for. She hesitated for a long time before carefully revealing the truth. 2 months ago, the previous student council president had jumped from the school roof and taken her own life. May and the previous president had been members of the biology club and close friends. But when asked why the previous president had done it, May firmly claimed she didn't know. Miyabi wasn't convinced. She was hiding something. But Ameno had a different perspective, saying that just because two people are close doesn't mean they share everything. Everyone has their secrets. While mingling with the students, Ameno uncovered another piece of information. The school's history teacher had mysteriously disappeared a month ago, and shortly after that, the mass comas began. Miyabi toured the school grounds and noticed that the small shrine marked on the map was now missing. May explained that, a while back, the biology club had decided to plant flowers nearby and, without permission, had dismantled the shrine. Upon hearing this, Miyabi muttered angrily that they really got what they deserved. Looking at the ruined shrine, Miyabi revealed his investigation's conclusion. It's a fox spirit who possessed the students. As the name suggests, the students had been possessed by a fox demon, causing their mental instability. The reason they attracted the fox demon was that the shrine dedicated to the guardian of fox spirits had been destroyed. Miyabi urged everyone to admit their wrongdoing and sincerely ask for the deity's forgiveness. To help with this, he set up a suggestion box around campus for students to confess their sins. To make his claim more credible, Miyabi pointed out that the previous student council president had been a member of the biology club. It was the biology club that had torn down the shrine. Just a month later, the history teacher, who had been close to the girl, disappeared as well. It was hard not to draw a connection. This was the consequence of angering the gods. May's face turned pale. Her discomfort didn't go unnoticed by the biology teacher who was watching nearby. The next moment, a gust of wind blew outside, and the teacher slowly lowered his head. Then, suddenly, he began screaming wildly like a chicken, as if struck by a sudden illness. Miyabi immediately suspected that the teacher was possessed by the fox spirit. He ordered the people around him to restrain him, and after performing a quick incantation, managed to calm him down. After this, the entire school believed Miyabi's words. Many students rushed to the suggestion box, tossing in letters of repentance. Among the letters, Miyabi found a few particularly interesting ones. Some students reported that the biology teacher had been acting suspiciously for a while, and there were already signs of something off. In his office, Miyabi discovered a wooden box, and the smell inside led him to believe it contained angel hair, an ancient and mysterious substance that was said to be a type of creature with weak supernatural powers, bringing good fortune to its owner. But Miyabi didn't delve into this mystery too much. He was more concerned with the rumors that the biology teacher had killed the history teacher and buried the body in the school's backyard. When Miyabi questioned the biology teacher about it, the teacher couldn't meet his eyes, showing clear signs of guilt. It seemed that he wasn't going to cry until he saw the coffin. With the help of May, the history teacher's body was found. At this point, the truth came to light. The biology teacher, realizing he had no way out, decided to take matters into his own hands and die along with his guilt before the police could sentence him. But just as he had knocked out May, Miyabi and the others arrived on the scene. The biology teacher no longer held anything back and confessed that he had forced the previous president into a tragic situation. He explained that he had discovered that both May and the previous student council president were secretly working part-time as maids outside the school to help support their families. Using this information, he blackmailed the two of them into installing cameras in the female changing rooms to satisfy his perverse desires. The two girls had already been guaranteed spots at university and didn't want any trouble before graduation, so they reluctantly obeyed. But later, the previous president couldn't bear it anymore and in her despair ended her life. May, deeply affected, sought help from the history teacher. However, the biology teacher, ever relentless, decided to confront the history teacher during a confrontation and, in a fit of rage, killed him by smashing his head with a statue. As the biology teacher finished recounting the entire story, he was taken to the police station. From his computer, the authorities found secretly filmed videos. Amino believed the case was almost closed, but Miyabi still had doubts. Many students had seen the biology teacher praying at the shrine, and his belief in the spiritual world, evidenced by his collection of angel hair, made it hard to believe that such a devout person could have been the one to destroy the shrine. The only logical explanation was that someone else was behind the killings. Miyabi took it a step further and speculated that both the two girls hadn't been working part-time as maids for extra money. They had actually been working for the history teacher. The history teacher had blackmailed them into helping him secretly film inappropriate videos to sell online. This illegal venture had allowed the history teacher to make a lot of money. It was strange because despite his modest background, he never seemed to lack money. The biology teacher, in fact, had unknowingly discovered this scheme and privately approached the history teacher, begging him to spare the two girls. But instead of agreeing, the history teacher demanded that May save the videos to the biology teacher's computer. May, unwilling to trap an innocent person, confronted the history teacher, and in the heat of the moment, a physical altercation ensued. In the chaos, the history teacher accidentally slipped and fatally struck his head on the statue. May completely broke down, pouring her heart out to the destroyed shrine. The biology teacher, hiding in the shadows, rushed to comfort her, using his words but not muscles, offering to take the blame to save her from her misery. His selflessness moved Miyabi. Such a noble human being was a rare find. Miyabi urged May to step up and take responsibility for her actions. Eventually, under his guidance, she turned herself in to the police. As for the cause of the mass fainting at school, Miyabi explained to the principal that it was due to the biology teacher blocking the ventilation shaft of a well while burying the body. This led to the accumulation of methane gas, which eventually spread around the school building. The half-rotted bamboo stalk near the ruined shrine was the best evidence that a venting passage once existed there. Now, as long as the well was reopened for ventilation, the fainting incidents would cease. With the case reaching its conclusion, Amino still couldn't shake his curiosity. Why had the biology teacher been so determined to take the blame for the students? The teacher explained that his courage came from the angel hair. When he had once prayed at the shrine, he had wished to obtain it, and not long after, the angel hair mysteriously appeared in front of the shrine. To him, this was a divine blessing, a sign that he had a duty to repay the gods. His unwavering sincerity deeply moved Amino. That day, in the park outside an apartment complex, children were happily playing when suddenly a sneaker fell from the sky, along with a pile of scattered metal fragments. A boy picked up the shoe and, to his horror, found a skeletal foot inside. The police quickly arrived at the scene. Just like the previous two cases, Hiruo publicly claimed responsibility for the crime. Based on the information gathered so far, the deceased had once been a top expert in national high-tech development, an authority in the field of quantum mechanics. 4 years ago, the expert had been flying to another city for a business trip when both he and his plane mysteriously vanished without a trace. After forensic analysis, the scattered parts at the crime scene were confirmed to belong to the very plane the expert had been flying. Miyabi immediately formulated a hypothesis. The expert had fallen into a time rift. After all, he was a pioneer in time rift research, and his disappearance might not have been an accident. It could have been an experiment. Otherwise, how could a person and a plane that vanished 4 years ago suddenly come crashing down from the sky now? Of course, the police chief wasn't buying his smelly bullshit. In his eyes, Miyabi was completely delusional. Meanwhile, the Resolution Office was facing scrutiny from the Government Oversight Committee. The recent cases were all closely tied to Hiruko, and oddly enough, they all required the Resolution Office's intervention to be solved. If it were just a coincidence, that would be one thing. But the fact that these incidents were happening right when the cabinet was discussing budget cuts and the possible dissolution of the Resolution Office made it hard not to suspect collusion between them and Hiruko. The police chief, however, was used to such distrust. He firmly assured the committee that their only mission was to protect humanity and that they would never betray that duty. Through further investigation, Miyabi and his team uncovered a suspicious lead. Within the expert's research team, a senior researcher had been expelled for fabricating experimental data. She had vehemently denied the accusation, but was removed nonetheless. After that, she disappeared from public view. Only a month later, the expert himself vanished. The connection between the two incidents was too strong to ignore. Forensic analysis of the wreckage revealed traces of potassium nitrate, a key ingredient in explosives. This suggested that the expert had had likely been assassinated with a bomb. Following this line of reasoning, Miyabi developed a new theory. He discovered that the expert had secretly accepted funding from various enterprises, including some with ties to espionage organizations. The falsified data scandal had led to the abrupt termination of his research, meaning those corporations lost their investments overnight. This gave them a strong motive for revenge. To uncover more insider details, Miyabi and Ameno decided to visit the research institute. After the expert's disappearance, a bespectacled man had taken over his position. However, unlike the expert, he lacked the ability to study time rifts and, in fact, completely rejected the idea that they even existed. As they talked, a lab assistant brought in coffee. Miyabi had heard that she used to be close to the senior researcher, so he casually asked if they had been in contact recently. The assistant's expression instantly turned cold as she firmly denied any connection. That reaction alone was suspicious. At that moment, the phone rang. To everyone's surprise, it was the missing researcher calling, after 4 years of complete silence. On speakerphone, she calmly stated her address and even went as far as to claim that it was the assistant who had leaked false information to the media about the time rift research being fabricated. The assistant panicked, repeatedly denying the accusation, while the bespectacled man gave her a thoughtful glance. Hearing the address, Ameno realized it was the same apartment complex where the airplane debris had been found. Without hesitation, he and Miyabi rushed over. At the researcher's apartment, a housekeeper greeted them at the door. The moment Miyabi saw the woman's face, he froze in shock. He hadn't expected the woman disguised as a housekeeper. Before meeting the senior researcher, he began investigating the scene. The rapidly spinning electric meter indicated the presence of a research lab. As he had suspected, the senior researcher had never stopped her research on time rifts over the past 4 years. In fact, she had even figured out how to communicate with people from the future through sound and text. Her obsessive drive stemmed from a desire to confront the expert and find out why she had been blamed for falsifying the time rift research and expelled from the team. Given her progress, her efforts seemed to be paying off. Miyabi was about to ask more questions when he was interrupted by the arrival of the police. Ameno had notified the chief. After all, she was still a cop. Fortunately, the police had found some useful information. They discovered that the deceased expert and the senior researcher had once been in a romantic relationship. However, before they could figure out more about their past, a new victim emerged. The right hand of the assistant was found on the Research Institute's rooftop lawn. From her locker, the police found potassium nitrate, suggesting she might have been making explosives. Her colleagues revealed that they had received an email from her late last night. The only text read that she had found the time rift. Her actions seemed to indicate that, like the expert, she had entered the time rift. Miyabi immediately sensed danger for the senior researcher. The spy organizations were likely closing in on her. He and Ameno rushed to her apartment, but as soon as they arrived at the door, an unexpected trap was sprung. When Ameno regained consciousness, she found herself, Miyabi, and the senior researcher tied up in an abandoned building with 2 masked men guarding them. Soon after, the bespectacled man appeared, holding a threatening note telling him to come to them if he didn't want the senior researcher to die. True to the message, he had arrived on time. No longer pretending, the bespectacled man revealed that he had an obsessive admiration for the senior researcher, believing she was the only one worthy of being called a research genius. When the expert had expelled her from the team, the bespectacled man harbored a grudge. During his involvement in preparing explosives, he had taken the opportunity to send the expert to his grave. As for the assistant, she had accidentally learned that she was the one who had spread the rumors about the senior researcher's alleged data falsification. Driven by his fanatic obsession, the bespectacled man had killed the assistant and disposed of her body in the sea, creating the illusion that she had vanished into the time rift. He believed that all his efforts were in support of the senior researcher, and for the 4 years of her disappearance, he had secretly maintained her research by embezzling research funds. His only wish was to hear the senior researcher say, "The time rift has been completed." That single sentence would validate all his efforts, but instead, the senior researcher bluntly told him that, as a murderer, he was not qualified to be a researcher, let alone understand the results of her work. The bespectacled man snapped. In a fit of rage, he tried to detonate a bomb, but just as he prepared to do so, something strange happened. His face suddenly contorted, and he began to struggle to breathe. The masked men took advantage of the moment and subdued him, allowing Miyabi and the senior researcher to free themselves from their restraints. It was then that Miyabi finally revealed the truth to Ameno. When he first came to the apartment, he had noticed suspicious individuals nearby, so he had arranged for a delivery guy and another office intern to secretly protect the senior researcher. Not only did they complete their task, but they also uncovered the identity of the suspicious figures, spies sent by corporate interests. They dealt with these threats, and now it was time to unmask the true killer. When the bespectacled man had recorded the senior researcher's address, Miyabi immediately sensed something was off. In the phone call, the address only mentioned the Central District, yet he had been able to pinpoint the apartment. This meant the bespectacled man already knew where the senior researcher lived. To trap him into confessing, the senior researcher agreed to Miyabi's plan to stage a scene. Fearing Amino might report them, they had her drugged to keep her out of the loop. Now that the killer had been caught, there was still the mystery of how the expert's foot, which had fallen into the sea 4 years ago, ended up in front of the apartment complex. Miyabi casually explained that it was simply a natural occurrence, a common result of strong winds. As the investigation concluded, the cabinet examined the senior researcher's social media and found a troubling email from Hiruko sent 2 months ago asking if she would like to become the new god. Upon hearing this, the chief furrowed his brow, wondering if the tragic god named Hiruko could truly exist. Although the case was officially closed, Miyabi believed it was important to tell the senior researcher the real reason the expert had expelled her from the team. 4 years ago, the expert had noticed the spy organizations targeting her, and in an effort to protect her, he had been forced to make a difficult decision. Hearing those words, the senior researcher was overwhelmed with emotion. She returned to her research lab and discovered that the expert had managed to communicate with her from the future, setting a meeting for the year 2032. Her research on time rifts had made a major breakthrough. These two ill-fated lovers would one day be reunited. Amino couldn't help but feel happy for them, but her joy was short-lived. A housekeeper entered the room, claiming she had been there for a long time. That meant the girl who had come last time was actually an imposter. A sudden realization struck Amino. She had seen this mysterious girl more than once before. Reviewing surveillance footage from the previous 3 cases, she found a disturbing pattern. The girl always appeared shortly after each crime took place. A bold theory emerged in her mind. Could this mysterious girl be none other than Hiruko? A few days later, in an office, a CEO dragged a fire extinguisher across the floor, ignoring the bewildered stares from those around him. Moving like a lifeless husk, he approached the window, smashed the glass with the extinguisher, and leapt to his death. This marked the 4th such suicide in recent days. Soon after, Hiruko released a statement claiming responsibility, calling it divine punishment for corrupt businessmen. With his appearances becoming more frequent, nearly everyone in society had heard his name. What made these suicides even more alarming was that all the victims happened to be industry elites, individuals vital to the nation's future. The cabinet was growing increasingly wary, wondering if Hiruko was deliberately trying to destabilize the country. However, since all the victims' families refused autopsies, their true causes of death remained uncertain. Miyabi noticed something odd in the injury reports. Among all the victims, only the CEO had injuries to his legs. His instincts told him this man was the key to solving the case. Miyabi and Amino visited the building where the CEO had jumped. Reviewing surveillance footage from before the incident, Miyabi caught something suspicious. The CEO's wife, herself the president of a neighboring company, had been widely recognized on social media as half of a power couple. Yet just 1 minute after his fall, she calmly retrieved something from his desk before walking away without the slightest panic. Her behavior was far too composed. When questioned, she adamantly denied taking anything, insisting she had merely gone to check on her husband after hearing about the incident. Miyabi seized on a key detail, asking if she had already suspected her husband was suicidal. Realizing her slip, she quickly backtracked, saying it was just a woman's intuition. Rather than press her further, Miyabi changed the subject, bringing up a loyalty card. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, but it was the only item all 4 victims had in common. The moment she saw it, she swallowed hard. She explained that the card was from a nearby bakery, one her husband often visited. Then, almost as an afterthought, she mentioned something chilling. Just days before his death, her husband had claimed to have seen a hanged ghost. According to legend, the hanged ghost was a supernatural entity that possessed its victims, driving them to madness and eventually suicide. When the police followed up with the other victims' families, they were shocked to discover the same eerie pattern. Each victim had reported seeing the ghost before their death. The consistency of these claims was so uncanny that even the most skeptical officers began to waver, wondering if this could really be the work of a supernatural entity. Miyabi, however, was more suspicious of the CEO's wife. One of the female officers had mentioned that the other families had only spoken up about the ghost after hearing the wife's testimony. Following her lead, Miyabi and Amino arrived at the bakery, a well-known shop specializing in organic bread. Its owner, a foreign worker, had earned a strong reputation among business professionals for his high-quality, healthy products. Just then, the sound of shattering glass rang out from nearby, followed by panicked screams. Another high-profile business figure had jumped to their death. A chilling pattern emerged. Like the previous 4 victims, this individual was an alumnus of the same university and had maintained close ties with the others. Determined to uncover the truth, the police chief finally persuaded one of the victims' families to allow an autopsy. The results came in swiftly. The cause of death was drug-induced psychosis. All 5 victims had been drug addicts. With this revelation, the theory of homicide collapsed. It seemed the victims, fearing exposure and the ruination of their reputations, had orchestrated their own suicides under the guise of Hiruko's divine punishment. Their desperate need to protect their public image had literally driven them to death. The investigation now shifted focus to uncovering the source of their drug supply. The club where the 5 frequently gathered became the prime suspect, but despite an exhaustive search, no traces of illegal substances were found. The lack of evidence puzzled Amino. If not there, then where could the transactions have taken place? At that moment, a delivery man arrived, summoned by Miyabi to bring them coffee. Casually, Miyabi handed him a small note, instructing her to this address and pick up some drugs for him. The instructions on how to buy it are written inside. Amino stared at him in disbelief. It turns out, through his investigation at the bakery, Miyabi discovered a crucial detail. Nowadays, everyone is used to mobile payments, and it's rare for anyone to carry cash. But the cash register at the bakery was filled with large amounts of money. How could a bakery selling 300 bread possibly have that much cash on hand? The only explanation was that other transactions were happening behind the scenes. He noticed that after some customers bought bread, they would discreetly slip cash into their loyalty cards while handing them over. The store owner would quickly swap the money for a bag and return it to the customer. Miyabi suspected that the bag likely contained drugs, and from the owner's panicked expression, it was clear she was under someone's control. She wasn't the mastermind. Amino, eager to report it to the police, was stopped by Miyabi. He said it's not time to arrest the store owner yet. The real drama is about to unfold with the live broadcast from the CEO's wife. Not long ago, Miyabi had presented his theory to the CEO's wife. The reason the police hadn't found the drugs at her office was thanks to his devoted wife. To protect her husband, she had not only hidden the drugs, but also contacted the other victims' families, instructing them to keep quiet about the drugs and shift the police's focus to the so-called hanged ghost. But then, just as things seemed settled, the woman turned the tables. Through a live broadcast, she suddenly admitted that her husband might have been involved in drug trafficking. Instead of clearing his name, she completely denied the existence of the hanged ghost, claiming the deaths of the 5 business elites were simply a result of drug-induced hallucinations, leading to their mental breakdowns and suicides. Miyabi instantly understood her motive. This was likely an attack on the bakery owner. Before he could respond, the delivery guy called to report that he hadn't been able to purchase the drugs. Just minutes earlier, the bakery owner had been abducted by several large men. Miyabi immediately instructed the delivery guy to chase after them while he and Amino prepared to set a trap. Luckily, with their martial arts skills, the two were able to rescue the owner quickly. From her, they learned the full story. The bakery owner had once worked at a bar where the 5 victims were regulars. Over time, they grew close, and eventually they offered to help her open her own bakery. Not only did they fund the location, but they even helped her attract customers. To her, they seemed like lifesavers. But as business picked up, their true intentions became clear. The bakery was a front for their drug dealings. While they attracted customers to the shop, it wasn't for selling bread. With the clientele in place, they needed someone to handle the money, and the store owner, unable to resist their threats, was forced to become their accomplice. With the truth now out, Miyabi still had one question. Why was it that only the CEO's body didn't show traces of drugs? This meant he hadn't been involved in drug use, so why did his wife lie about it? The answer came from the bakery owner. It turned out that the CEO's wife had been abusing her husband for years. He had suffered in silence, too ashamed to divorce her because of their public image and financial ties. Eventually, he sought solace in the arms of the kind-hearted bakery owner, and the two began an affair. When his wife discovered it, she couldn't lash out at her husband publicly. Her image had to be preserved. Instead, she decided on a more cunning revenge. She exposed the drug trade to the authorities, knowing that the drug dealers would go after the bakery owner, and true to form, they wouldn't let her live. As for how she manipulated her husband into taking his life, she used his love for his public image against him. She planted a photo of him with the bakery owner in his drawer, along with a note that read that they need to talk. The CEO immediately recognized her handwriting and realized his affair had been discovered. Fearing public shame as an unfaithful man, he succumbed to despair and took his own shitty life. The photo the CEO's wife retrieved from his desk wasn't the drugs, it was the photo of the affair. Of course, this was all Miyabi's deduction. The woman would never never admit to it, and without concrete evidence, the police couldn't take action. Miyabi made it clear that his only goal was to have her leave him alone. After they left, the woman stared at the broken photo, her tears falling. She had gotten her revenge, but there was no satisfaction in her victory. She could no longer smile. Although the case had officially been closed, the public remained unconvinced by the explanation that a batch of bad drugs had triggered a chain of suicides. Online discussions continued to speculate that Hiruko had descended to deliver divine punishment. But how could they truly put this case to rest? As Miyabi reflected on the entire incident, he recalled the small spots found on the fingertips of the fifth victim. That led him to another possible explanation. The bakery owner specialized in organic bread, which contained a compound called ergot alkaloids. This toxic substance, often found in poor-quality wheat, was known to induce hallucinations. In medieval Europe, entire communities had suffered mass poisoning due to it. The public autopsy report soon confirmed Miyabi's theory, finally giving the Prime Minister a reasonable explanation to present to the people. However, the bakery owner firmly insisted that she had always prioritized quality. There was no way she had used subpar wheat. Amino observed her carefully and sensed no deception. Instead, suspicion shifted toward a temporary worker at the bakery. A deeper investigation revealed that the worker's entire resume was forged. Moreover, every time they appeared on surveillance footage, the video would distort, just like when Amino had previously encountered the mysterious girl. Reviewing the bakery's security footage, she also noticed a wooden plaque from the shrine displayed inside. This triggered a memory. The same shrine had also appeared in a previous case. Wasting no time, Amino rushed to the shrine, and sure enough, she ran into the girl again. Pressing her for answers, Amino asked if she was truly Hiruko. The girl didn't respond directly. Instead, she asked if she believed in gods. Then, in an eerie calm, she claimed she is a god. At that moment, a suffocating force overwhelmed Amino. Her surroundings blurred as if she were sinking into deep water, sight and sound fading into nothingness. Powerless, she could only watch as the girl walked away. Then, just as suddenly, Miyabi appeared. He had anticipated this outcome the moment he saw Amino running out. It was clear he knew this girl from before. Just as the string of suicides ended, a series of bombings sent the city into further chaos. The presence of Hiruko had sparked widespread terror, forcing the government to classify her as the highest-level threat and mobilize every available police force to track her down. By reviewing surveillance footage from previous cases and using Amino's intel, authorities came to a chilling realization. The mysterious girl might be the Hiruko they had been searching for. Yet, despite knowing her identity, the police chief refused to discuss her and was unwilling to cooperate in finding her. Even though the government seemed to be keeping secrets, the Resolution Office continued to assist the police in their investigation. Analyzing footage from the 3 bombing sites, they finally spotted the girl in the crowd. But one thing didn't add up. If she was Hiruko, why did she always appear after the incidents had already occurred? Hiruko had always sent out a warning exactly 1 hour before each explosion, proving that the attacks were premeditated. Yet there was no sign of her near the crime scenes in the hours leading up to the blasts. The police chief suspected that Hiruko had an accomplice. Meanwhile, Miyabi noted something unusual. Hiruko would send out the warning, but then a separate call would be made to report the exact location to the authorities. The fact that someone was so willing to tip off the police seemed uncharacteristically kind. This meant that the person making the emergency calls and the person setting off the bombs were not the same. For the first time, the police chief took Miyabi's theory seriously. Just then, another bombing threat was issued. Minutes later, the police hotline received a call. The voice on the other end reported that the next explosion would take place at the city's central stadium. Authorities immediately began evacuating civilians. Amid the chaos, a woman dressed in white hurried toward the stadium. Unlike the panicked crowds running for safety, she was moving against the flow, heading straight for the underground level. There, she found a hidden bomb inside a storage locker. After making sure no one was watching, she quickly turned to escape. But just as she was about to leave, she heard a child's cry. With no time to hesitate, she scooped up the child and sprinted toward the exit. The explosion's shockwave tore through the air, sending her flying like a Barbie toy. When the dust settled, the child was unharmed. Relieved, the woman let herself collapse into unconsciousness. Moments later, the police arrived and rushed her to the hospital. Meanwhile, an investigation into her identity began immediately. She was a single mother working at a pharmacy 5 kilometers from the crime scene. According to her co-workers, the moment the bombing threat went public, she had suddenly dashed out of the store. Surveillance footage near the pharmacy also captured her making a phone call, the exact time matching the police's emergency tip-off. Upon closer inspection, it became clear she had used voice-changing software during the call. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the single mother denied being the one who had reported the bombing threat, claiming it was all just a coincidence. Miyabi immediately exposed her lie. According to him, this was already the fourth person she had saved in the past 2 years. If it were just coincidence, why would she go to such lengths to rush to the underground level of the stadium? It was as if she already knew exactly where the bomb was hidden. Realizing her secret could no longer be kept, the single mother finally confessed the truth. She claimed to have the gift of far sight. Hearing this, Miyabi's excitement was palpable. After a brief pause, 2 men who introduced themselves as the single mother's close friends arrived at the hospital with her daughter. The moment Miyabi saw the little girl, he couldn't take his eyes off her. He introduced himself seriously, and when their hands met, he even closed his eyes for a moment. Just then, a police officer informed them that Hiruko had issued a new crime warning. Thanks to the girl's far sight, they quickly identified the location of the next explosion. However, using such abilities seemed to take a toll on the little girl's health as she suddenly grew weak. Yet, only the single mother knew the precise location of the bomb. So she begged the resolution office for permission to take her daughter to the scene. When they arrived, Amino intended to go in with them, but Miyabi insisted she stay behind to watch the girl and, above all, make sure no one took her away. What the single mother didn't expect, though, was that the bomb's location had been changed at the last minute. Just then, Amino called, saying that the little girl had sensed that the bomb was now in a different spot. It turned out that the one with the far sight wasn't the single mother, but her daughter. Guided by the girl's vision, Miyabi located the bomb and successfully moved it to a safe area, suffering only minor injuries. Thankfully, no one was harmed. Seeing the Farsight ability in action, Amino had no choice but to believe that there were indeed gods in the world. In reality, every time the little girl saved someone, her body endured immense pain. But to her, it didn't matter. She felt it was her duty to save the world. The only thing she truly cared about was her mother's safety. A mysterious person called, informing them that the single mother had been kidnapped. The caller demanded that the little girl be brought to him if they wanted to save her mother. Miyabi immediately understood. It was a trap set by Hiruko. There was no doubt the little girl would die if she went, and he urged her not to go. But the girl refused to back down. She wanted to save her mother. The girl's courage deeply moved Miyabi, and he requested that the police chief send armed personnel to help. The police chief agreed, though Miyabi asked Ameno to keep the operation under wraps, as it was no longer something ordinary people could handle. The 3 of them followed the instructions to the meeting point, but instead of Hiruko, his followers were waiting for them. They had been lying in wait for the mother and daughter for some time. The followers quickly bound Miyabi and Ameno. At this point, Miyabi realized that Hiruko's target had always been the gods. He had likely noticed someone with special abilities near the single mother and had used the bombings to track down her daughter. Killing all those with godlike abilities and ruling the world seemed to be Hiruko's ultimate goal. The followers placed the bomb in front of Miyabi and Ameno, waiting for the little girl to walk far enough before pressing the detonation button. But just as they were about to act, the mysterious girl appeared. The air twisted, and the followers fell unconscious, allowing Miyabi and Ameno to escape. Then, the girl, along with the delivery guy and Miyabi, reached out to the followers. This was the soul-extracting ritual, a technique that wiped their memories of the supernaturals. Ameno watched in disbelief since he believed that the mysterious girl was Hiruko. But why did it seem like she was on the resolution office's side? With mother and daughter safe, Miyabi advised that they avoid talking about gods when questioned by the police. As for the followers, they readily confessed to the bombings. Though the police still couldn't figure out Hiruko's true intentions, at least this outcome was something they could report to their superiors. Considering the little girl's importance, the police chief suggested that the single mother entrust her daughter to the resolution office's protection, allowing herself to live a normal life. Without a second thought, the single mother refused. The chief didn't insist and kindly escorted the mother and daughter back home. With them gone, only Miyabi and Ameno remained in the office. What had been inevitable finally came to pass. Miyabi explained to Ameno that the little girl's true identity was that of a divine being with the power to foresee and prevent disasters. This was why she felt a sense of duty to protect humanity. The real purpose of the Resolution Office's existence was to help those like the little girl who had reincarnated on Earth hide their identities. However, due to the emergence of Hiruko, the Resolution Office had recently been forced to adjust its responsibilities. Its first priority now was to capture Hiruko and stop him from eliminating more gods. Having witnessed the little girl's abilities, Amino quickly accepted this explanation. She even speculated that there were other gods within the resolution office, and Miyabi confirmed her guess. In fact, each and every member of the resolution office was a god. The mysterious girl, Toyotama, was the daughter of the sea god, capable of controlling water. She was part of the resolution office. She had been present at several of the previous crime scenes because she had been worshipped at her shrine. The police chief was the Inari god, the god of agriculture and food. No wonder he was such a great cook. The delivery guy was a god who protected traffic safety, with a special skill to always find the right path. Even if he didn't know where someone was, he could rely on his mental GPS to guide them to their destination. There was also a pharmacy assistant who occasionally helped out. He was a god of medicine, skilled in pharmacology. Upon hearing this, Amino could hardly bring herself to look Miyabi in the eye. From everything she had learned over the past few days, she guessed that Miyabi himself must be a major god. Miyabi was the god of discernment, able to tell good from evil. Unlike the others who used aliases, Miyabi had kept his own name for the convenience of his divine companions recognizing him. So far, he had been able to spot the malevolent intent in every person involved in each case. He was like a chosen detective, but since even murderers have some good in them, solving the case still required analysis. Ameno couldn't help but feel a little afraid. If gods were said to be immortal, how old must Miyabi be? Miyabi candidly answered her, explaining that this could be traced back to ancient times. While the soul might live on, the body goes through the same life cycle as humans: birth, aging, sickness, and death. A god's soul is reborn in a human body, and once the person reaches a certain age, they begin to remember everything. Of course, there were exceptions. A god's memory could also be erased. Amino had witnessed the soul-capturing ritual, which worked not only on humans, but also on gods. The earliest cases of divine disappearance involved gods whose memories were erased, and then their bodies died, causing them to vanish forever, with no chance of reincarnation. So far, Hiruko had erased 5 gods. This meant that the first 5 victims in Hiruko's case were all gods. This was a tragedy unlike any that had occurred before. Gods existed to maintain the balance of nature. If their numbers continued to decrease, misfortune would increase, leading to chaos in the world. If humanity ever gained control, the only possible outcome would be destruction. Miyabi's words shocked Ameno. She had thought this was just some mystery with a mystical twist, but now the story had entered a whole new level. A few days later, Hiruko released a new crime warning: the curse of the dog god. 5 popular beauty influencers were found dead in their homes, the cause being suffocation due to sudden overeating. The dog god was an ancient deity associated with dogs. Legends said that those possessed by it would lose their minds and become gluttonous. Miyabi deduced that this case wasn't directly caused by Hiruko himself, but by the dog god's priesthood. These priests used incantations to control the dog god, cursing others by inserting cursed dog hair into their bodies, which allowed the dog god to possess them. At the scene, the police found a supplement from a beauty salon, an unbranded product that claimed to have anti-aging properties. Each of the victims had taken this supplement, which seemed suspicious. However, the tests didn't detect anything wrong with it. Miyabi secretly took a pill, planning to have the pharmacy assistant investigate it further. Amino felt uneasy about Miyabi's actions, demanding to know why he didn't trust humans. Miyabi didn't deny it. History had shown that humans couldn't be trusted, and the chain of bombings was enough proof that there were people within the police force who were on Hiruko's side. After all, how else could the single mother have been so easily kidnapped, despite being under tight protection? From the police reports, Miyabi traced the supplement's origin back to the beauty salon, which was run by an old director and his beautiful partner. After teaming up with his partner, the director's business had expanded rapidly, as if assisted by divine forces. This woman was no ordinary person. When they learned that the police had visited, she personally came forward to handle the situation, turning down the request to meet with the officers. But not long afterward, the director sent his secretary to pass along a message. He was willing to meet with the resolution office. The director was now elderly, and his life was nearing its end. As soon as he saw Miyabi, he naturally started a conversation, revealing that the two had known each other for a long time. The director, too, was a god. His power was the ability to heal injuries and illnesses. Amino couldn't help but sigh. He could heal others, but was unable to heal himself. It seemed that the director understood something from her words, and his gaze shifted to Miyabi. Amino noticed his unusual reaction and pressed him for an explanation, but he quickly deflected the question. Miyabi asked the director if he knew the origin of the supplement. Through the research of the pharmacy assistant, Miyabi had discovered a suspicious ingredient in the supplement. The director wondered if it was Mermaid related. The moment this guess was confirmed, the director was plunged into endless bitterness, regret. He had once been seduced by beauty and chosen the wrong path in life. 90 years ago, in his past life, he had fallen in love with a woman. Not long after their marriage, he contracted a plague and tragically passed away, leaving his lover behind. At the time, they promised each other that they would be together in their next life. The director knew she was only a mortal, and that wish could never be fulfilled. So, in this life, he chose to focus on his medical beauty career, abandoning his longing for love. However, after witnessing the shallow human obsession with beauty, the director grew weary. His deep-rooted commitment to his original path began to waver. Eventually, he married his longtime secretary, intending to stay with her for life. But 2 years ago, a beautiful partner appeared, bearing a face identical to his former lover. They quickly fell in love, and the director even considered divorcing his secretary. Out of guilt, he wrote a will, leaving all his wealth and the beauty clinic to his secretary after his death. At first, the beautiful partner had no objections. She continued to shower him with affection and used her sharp business sense to help expand his career. It was only when she learned that the director's days were numbered that she revealed her true, greasy colors. It seemed that she had approached him for his wealth and the clinic. She began using his resources to research the elixir of immortality. Now that the director was dying and his wealth was about to go to the secretary, she accelerated her research. It was said that eating mermaid meat could grant eternal life, so she started acquiring the legendary mermaids, though many of them were fake. She mixed the mermaid specimens into the supplements, tricking the beauty influencers into consuming them. The director knew all of this, but he hadn't intervened. Not entirely because of love, but because of his exhaustion with gods protecting humanity. After their conversation with the director, Miyabi and Ameno went to the beautiful partners lab, where they found numerous mermaid specimens. To amass such a collection, money was just one factor. The real requirements were intelligence networks and the ability to acquire specimens through violent means if necessary. It seemed the only person capable of this was Hiruko. The secretary told them she had hired a private investigator to secretly follow the beautiful partner, and she was currently on her way to acquire more mermaids. With the address the secretary provided, the two rushed to the delivery location. The beautiful partner was indeed there, but she was bound. Before they could react, a knife was pressed to her chicken throat. At that moment, the mastermind finally revealed herself. To their surprise, it was the secretary. She was also a follower of Hiruko. The secretary despised the beautiful partner for stealing the director's heart. To expose her true nature, she had hired kidnappers to help gather the mermaids. She believed that once the director saw the beautiful partner's obsession with immortality, he would think she was only with him for his wealth and would ultimately leave this world out of guilt. As for why she needed the resolution office to be involved, the secretary explained that it was an order from Hiruko. She had received an email from him, which not only outlined the criminal plan, but also included a tuft of dog hair. The secretary followed instructions and glued the dog hair onto the influencers who had taken the supplements, causing them to binge eat. The secretary hadn't just come to send off the resolution office, she intended to hand over the beautiful partner to Hiruko. Miyabi instantly grew alert. How could an ordinary human attract the attention of a god? It seemed the beautiful partner's identity was far from simple. Just as the secretary was about to act, the police arrived in time and Miyabi quickly countered. Ameno now understood why Miyabi didn't trust humans. After the earlier incident, she had secretly contacted the police herself. In the end, the case was concluded with the revelation that the supplement contained an appetite-inducing substance, and the dog god case was wrapped up. Of course, there were still some mysterious matters to deal with. Miyabi had figured out the beautiful partner's identity. She was the legendary human who became immortal by eating mermaid flesh. The beautiful partner didn't deny his guess. She had indeed resumed her research on mermaid meat, but not for her own immortality. She wanted to save the director who was about to die. However, just the night before, the director had passed away. Fate was strange. Though the director had claimed to have fallen in love with a woman who looked exactly like his former lover, it turned out she was indeed the same person. The beautiful partner, unknowingly, had fallen in love with the same soul, though it now had a different appearance. Ameno was moved by their love and couldn't help but reveal the truth to her. Ameno revealed that the director was a god, which meant that as long as the beautiful partner stayed alive, there would eventually be a chance for them to reunite. The beautiful partner was overcome with joy and tears. Unfortunately, according to the rules, any memory of the gods must be erased, and Miyabi had to perform a soul extraction on her. This meant that she would forget the director, but she believed that even if she lost her memories, she wouldn't miss the chance to reunite with her lover. The scene was so touching that even Miyabi, who distrusted humans, couldn't help but feel moved. Back at the resolution office, the members were eating pizza and discussing the case. Miyabi couldn't quite figure out why Hiruko was interested in the immortality potion. He was a god himself, so it seemed pointless. The group fell into deep thought, wondering if Hiruko was not a god after all. Suddenly, Amino broke the silence and asked the delivery guy a completely unrelated question: if he was still her husband now. At those words, everyone was stunned. Their reactions made Amino certain of one thing: she, too, was a god. To understand what happened, let's rewind 4 months. The goddess of grains was a good friend of the Resolution Office team and often came to cook delicious meals for them. One day, while out, she encountered Hiruko, and immediately her memory and her godly form disappeared. This marked the 4th complete death of a god, and the news devastated the Resolution Office members. At the time, the leader of the Resolution Office had been Amino. She was the celestial goddess of transportation, married to the delivery guy in many past lives. They were the divine couple. Her power was summoning, which could be incredibly useful. It could force a god to appear right in front of her, like drawing an SSR card. In this modern world, it was essentially like using a smartphone. Given the recent string of god disappearances, Amino felt personally responsible. She suggested using her summoning ability to contact other gods and find out Hiruko's whereabouts. However, Miyabi strongly opposed her plan. Summoning more gods would expose their identities and alert Hiruko to Amino's presence. If Amino were in danger, it would be much easier for Hiruko to take them down one by one. What Amino needed to do was conceal her identity and quietly search for clues about Hiruko. Miyabi and Amino worked seamlessly together. Using only the victim's social circle, they identified the next possible god at risk. They found a direct connection between the 4 deceased, which suggested that Hiruko might have interrogated them before their deaths. As a result, Katada, who had a close relationship with the goddess of grains, became a high-priority person for protection. Upon hearing of his friend's passing, Katada was grief-stricken, but also warned Amino to be extra careful. He had once mentioned Hiruko to the goddess of grains, and Hiruko had likely found out about it. After meeting with Katada, Miyabi and Amino went to a bar to have a drink. At first, they chatted casually as friends, not discussing work, gossiping about everyday things. But gradually, their professional instincts kicked in. Amino observed the humans around them and theorized that Hiruko might not be a true god, but something else. After all, technology had advanced so much that a human could discover the existence of gods, then use the internet and AI to pinpoint them and make them disappear. However, Miyabi immediately rejected this theory. No matter how advanced human technology became, only gods could perform soul extraction. Amino had expected this response, but she pointed out that there had been humans in the past who had acquired godly powers through study, and soul extraction was not necessarily exclusive to gods. With enough dedication, humans might even learn to perform it themselves. Miyabi pondered and asked if she thought someone with such a strong will could exist in this degenerate age. Amino's silence was deafening, but it gave Miyabi an idea. Perhaps the so-called god Hiruko was using technology to locate the other gods. As the best partners, they always managed to find new ways to approach the case. Meanwhile, the bar's security cameras recorded their conversation in detail. In the underground garage, a man was carefully analyzing the footage of Amino's words. Looking at the 97% match, he knew it was time to make his move. The next day, Amino learned from Katada that Hiruko had released a new criminal declaration. This time, the target was the delivery guy. Amino immediately felt a sense of urgency and quickly got into Katada's car to meet up with Miyabi and the others. In the evening, the delivery guy was waiting at the subway station, but Amino didn't show up. Just then, Miyabi contacted him to inform him that Hiruko had just released a declaration about Katada's disappearance. To verify the situation, they needed him to find her. After searching, the delivery guy couldn't locate Katada's whereabouts, meaning he had likely been killed and vanished. The chief, after reviewing the surveillance footage, discovered that Katada had been in contact with Amino just before his disappearance. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Miyabi and the others hurried to track down Amino's location. By the time they reached her, they found Amino badly injured and unconscious, blood pouring from her wounds. Toyotama used her powers to keep her alive just long enough to get her back to the Resolution Office. There, a woman sitting in the office was revealed to be their savior. She was the Moon Goddess. Under the power of moonlight, the Moon Goddess could manipulate time. She could revert Amino's body to the state it was in before the injury. With all her strength, the Moon Goddess successfully saved Amino, but some things could not be reversed. They discovered that Amino had undergone a soul extraction, meaning she had lost all memories of the gods and had become a mere human. This was a heavy blow to everyone. While Amino was still alive, she had become a stranger to them. The next day, the chief held a meeting with the higher-ups to discuss Amino's fate. They unanimously decided that she would live out her life as a human, severing all ties with the Resolution Office. Upon hearing this, Toyotama was unable to understand, and the delivery guy cried in sadness. Only Miyabi remained resolute. He and Amino had made a promise to protect each other if anything happened to one of them. To him, Amino wasn't just the leader of the resolution office, but his most trusted partner. He could never go back on his word. It didn't matter if she lost her divine identity. She could still rejoin the resolution office as a human. Moreover, soul extraction didn't mean it was impossible to recover her memories. As long as they could find Hiruko, who had done this to her, they might be able to retrieve them. After much persuasion, the chief reluctantly agreed to make an exception. That's how Amino eventually rejoined the resolution office, and from the moment she did, she felt a long-missed sense of belonging. It turned out they had always been a family after all. When Miyabi saw Amino deduce his divine identity from just observation, he couldn't help but give her the compliment she always loved to hear. After that, he shared with her everything from the past, every detail. Amino quickly adapted to her new role as leader. She promised Miyabi that she would live up to the resolution office's expectations and bring Hiruko to justice. Meanwhile, the police received new information. The mermaid mummy from the dog god case had been stolen, and the thief was likely an insider. At the same time, on the rooftop of a building, a man handed a mermaid to the moon goddess. He had one request: to awaken the mermaid. The man's terrifying aura intimidated the moon goddess, but she gathered the courage to ask his intentions. He said he planned to replace all the gods, which sent chills down her spine all the way to her smelly butt. Later that night, the moon goddess secretly followed a man to a hidden corner. Using a spell to accelerate time, she sent him straight to the realm of bliss. Since saving Amino, she had been targeted by the man who seemed to be Hiruko. On the surface, he was an IT guru, and he had used high-tech methods to locate many gods. The IT guru wanted to use her divine powers to create an immortality potion. It turned out that the moon goddess had a daughter who had been cyberbullied and wrongfully died. To avenge her daughter, she needed the IT guru's technology to find the perpetrators. Only then did she agree to cooperate. After she dealt with the bullies, the IT guru promised that he would release a criminal declaration under Hiruko's name. It seemed that Amino's earlier deduction had been correct. Hiruko was the human who had mastered high-tech methods. At first, the cooperation between them was smooth and unnoticed by the resolution office or the police. But when the IT guru had achieved his goal and wanted to end the deal prematurely, the moon goddess realized she had been deceived. However, the cyberbullies were still unresolved, and it wasn't over yet. The IT guru promised her that if she helped him uncover the true identity of the god of death, he would continue helping her find the people she needed. To put it simply, the death god had the power to grant death to other gods, and killing him would cause the death of all gods in the world. Therefore, his true identity had always been kept a secret. The moon goddess immediately refused, saying a mortal could not see such a god. But the IT guru believed she could, since by serving him, she had already met the conditions of seeing the death god in the world of gods. The next day, as promised, the IT guru posted a criminal declaration online. He claimed that the recent series of starvation deaths were a divine punishment from the gods. He also added a statement: the gods' disappearance would soon end, and the world would soon be reborn. This sparked mass panic, and the level of societal fear reached its peak. Seeing the increasing number of Hiruko's followers, the cabinet could no longer stand idly by. For the first time, the reviewing officer intervened in the investigation. In this case, the 4 victims were all well-fed but died suddenly of starvation overnight. Their watches had also malfunctioned in strange ways, and no explanation could be found other than divine intervention. Upon reviewing surveillance footage, a suspicious woman caught the police's attention. They asked the resolution office if they knew who she was. When Miyabi saw the woman, he was shocked. It was the moon goddess. He quickly suppressed his surprise and concocted a story about a hunger god causing the deaths. The chief, after hearing this, gave a nonchalant response and agreed to follow this lead. However, his agreement wasn't based on trust, but rather deeper suspicion. It turned out that during the investigation into the stolen mermaid mummy, the chief had noticed Amino's name among the list of people who could have been near the time the item went missing. Recently, her relationship with the resolution office had visibly grown closer. The chief began to suspect that someone within the resolution office might have used her to help Hiruko with the theft. Thus, in front of the resolution office, he had to feign cooperation, making sure not to raise their suspicions. The chief knew well that the relationship between the resolution office and the cabinet was quite close, so to understand the stakes, he hoped the reviewing officer would reveal the truth. However, the reviewing officer had other concerns and firmly refused his request. Meanwhile, Miyabi and Amino visited the moon goddess's bar. Miyabi couldn't understand why a god who was supposed to protect humanity would resort to killing. He wanted to get to the bottom of it. From a friend of the moon goddess, they learned her motive for killing. Her daughter had been cyberbullied and falsely accused, and unable to bear the harassment, she ended her own life. The moon goddess, in her quest for vengeance, had been relentlessly searching for the bullies. At first, she sued the account that spread rumors about her daughter, demanding they reveal the identity of the person behind it. But because the account was registered with an overseas server, the police informed her that they couldn't trace it. She then sued the 4 main perpetrators, but the prosecution rejected the case due to lack of evidence. Her hopes of using legal means to bring the wrongdoers to justice were crushed. After that, she turned to Haruko for help, both of them focusing solely on solving the case without realizing that the police had discreetly assigned an officer to follow them. The moon goddess had entered the police's sights through rather unsavory means. The next day, the reviewing officer handed over the victim's details to the resolution office. The chief noticed that a new name had been added to the list. The reviewing officer explained that he was the person who originally posted the defaming video. This information had been painstakingly uncovered by the cabinet through big data. After the god disappearance incident started, the cabinet realized they couldn't identify Haruko on their own, so they partnered with a tech company to use its big data analysis services to aid in the investigation. The company, of course, was the IT gurus. It seemed that the deal had truly been misplaced. After the chief received the information, he prepared to leave, but the reviewing officer wasn't willing to let him go. Every time the resolution office wanted to conduct an internal investigation, they never explained why. Since both sides were working for national security, why couldn't they share the information they had found? The chief bluntly replied that it was because they had been backstabbed by humans too many times. His answer displeased the reviewing officer, who immediately began looking into the resolution office. That night, the reviewing officer called the chief and meticulously shared all the results of the company president's investigation. In his eyes, the resolution office had become a dangerous cult organization, threatening national security. The 5 victims in the god disappearance case had all been closely linked to the resolution office, and the suspect in this case, the moon goddess, had also entered and exited the resolution office. To say there was no connection, he wouldn't believe it. At the same time, before the resolution office could set up an ambush, the moon goddess voluntarily surrendered herself. Under Miyabi's questioning, she confessed to her crimes and even admitted to Haruko's creation of immortality capsules. Her attitude was one of resignation, as if she had no more fear of death and was ready to let whatever happen, happen. Miyabi was taken aback by her candor, but what truly shocked him were the moon goddess's next words. She said among those present, there might be Haruko's spies. Although it seemed like a mere test, everyone's expressions were telling. According to protocol, a god who violates their duties and harms humans like the moon goddess would be sent on her way by the god of death. The moon goddess had long accepted her fate, and rather than fearing death, she even looked forward to meeting the god of death. Soon, Miyabi entered, and to his surprise, he hid his identity. The moon goddess, having long lost her will to survive, calmly watched as the execution was carried out. But just as the moment arrived, the police burst in and arrested her. Miyabi tried to intervene, but the chief paid him no heed and had him arrested as well. As soon as they stepped into the moonlight, the moon goddess seized the opportunity and successfully escaped. During her flight, she informed the company president that Miyabi was the god of death. Everything that happened that night had been prearranged between them, all to draw out the identity of the god of death. Once the message was sent, the moon goddess received the exact location of the last defamer. She arrived at the person's location and quickly cast a series of spells. This time, she didn't let the person starve to death, but chose a slower method, one that allowed him to hear about her daughter's suffering before he died, all while he repented. Before she could even finish speaking, the person suddenly charged at her. It turned out this was all part of the company president's plan. Once he knew the identity of the god of death, he would quickly abandon the moon goddess. He had informed the defamer in advance to be cautious of her. This drove the moon goddess to meet her tragic fate. The resolution office arrived too late, but fortunately the moon goddess still had a slim chance of survival. Yet she no longer desired to live. The indifference of humanity had made her utterly despair. She placed her hand on her forehead and performed a soul-extracting ritual on herself. From then on, the moon goddess no longer existed. The moon goddess's departure was a huge blow to Amino, who had trusted humanity so deeply. Later, the defamer who killed the moon goddess escaped legal punishment, claiming self-defense due to the lack of surveillance footage at the crime scene. This infuriated Amino, who grew to hate selfish humanity just as much as the moon goddess had. Later, Miyabi saw the text message the moon goddess had sent and realized his true identity had been exposed. His intuition told him that the resolution office's inner circle was no longer trustworthy. Sure enough, during a conversation with the chief, he realized that at some point, the chief had become a puppet of Hiruko. It turned out that if a special talisman was placed on the back of someone's neck, Hiruko could possess their body. The real Hiruko was a powerful god, and the IT guru was one of his human followers. Because Hiruko could possess different people, his true identity remained a mystery. Using his agility, Miyabi managed to avoid the talisman's control, but no matter how strong a mortal body is, it can't match the power of a god's weapon. Hiruko used a sleight of hand, successfully stabbing Miyabi in the side with a divine artifact. The wound felt like a gaping hole, and blood poured out uncontrollably. Miyabi felt his consciousness begin to fade, but when he thought of Hiruko and how this very artifact had nearly killed Amino, his anger surged. In his final moments, he gathered all his strength, determined to perish along with Hiruko. But Hiruko wasn't afraid at all. The chief's physical body was just a puppet. No one knew where the real Hiruko was. Miyabi couldn't understand. If Hiruko wanted to eliminate the god of death, he too would cease to exist. So what was the point of his so-called plan to recreate the world? The chief told him that eliminating the god of death and sending all the gods to their end was not Hiruko's ultimate goal. What he truly wanted was to create new gods and become the true ruler of the world. As the talisman was torn, Hiruko left the chief's body. Miyabi immediately shared everything, including the fact that he was the god of death. According to plan, the only way to protect the god of death now was for Miyabi to die in this life and for his soul to immediately reincarnate. However, Miyabi pleaded with the chief to save him because Hiruko had threatened that if he died, he would take his anger out on Amino by killing her. The resolution office's family was still tightly bound by their emotions, and they quickly began working to save him. With the help of a divine healer, Miyabi finally regained consciousness. The situation was urgent, and the resolution office had to find the traitor among humans before Hiruko could cause more damage. Miyabi began by questioning the reviewing officer. The police had been unaware of the moon goddess's involvement with the resolution office, which meant someone had used a certain method to leak the information. As the reviewing officer listened, his unease grew, and despite his attempts to hide it, he couldn't conceal his discomfort. The IT guru's existence was classified as a state secret, and the reviewing officer reluctantly responded that the source was an informant. Miyabi understood the officer's position and, before leaving, reminded him to be cautious. He also secretly took a lock of his hair. Once back at the resolution office, he immediately handed the hair to the disguise god. This deity had the ability to assume another person's form simply by touching their body or hair. Miyabi had anticipated that the reviewing officer would be reluctant to cooperate, so he asked the disguise god to pose as him and go to the police station to gather the informant's identity. Unfortunately, the disguise god was too timid. Even with Miyabi controlling him remotely, the disguise was seen through during a confrontation with the chief. However, the disguise god did manage to gather the crucial clue that the informant was, in fact, the IT guru. This was not a wasted trip. After this incident, Miyabi decided to reveal all of the resolution office's secrets to the chief, hoping to form an alliance. He believed that their goals aligned and that, after all, the chief's judgment was solid. It turned out that the chief and the moon goddess had been childhood sweethearts, but due to their vastly different statuses, they hadn't ended up together. From the resolution office, the chief learned of his lover's feelings, but he regretted not protecting her. However, out of loyalty to his profession, he couldn't abandon his principles and join forces with a group of self-proclaimed gods. The two parted ways unhappily. Meanwhile, Miyabi deduced that the IT guru was Hiruko, and it was time to face him. Before setting off, Miyabi made detailed preparations. He and Toyotama would confront the IT guru head-on, while the delivery guy would assist in secret. Amino and the others would stay behind in case of an emergency, ready to call for backup. He also mentioned having prepared a bottle of poison, which would be used in case Hiruko tried to extract his soul, allowing him to reincarnate instead. If he missed the opportunity, the delivery guy would detonate a bomb, taking everyone present to the afterlife. Thus, the three of them carried the weight of their lives with the belief that they would die in the process as they stepped out of the resolution office's gates. Toyotama knew this battle was unlikely to end well. While sitting in the car with Miyabi, she couldn't help but ask if he liked Amino. She had already realized that despite their brief romance centuries ago, Miyabi had never truly liked her. Amino had always been the one in his heart. Gods sure had complicated love lives. That night, the IT guru was ready to meet them. The moment he saw Miyabi, he eagerly introduced himself. But Miyabi didn't believe him. He knew that Hiruko was already inside the resolution office. When Hiruko had possessed the chief, he had tried to possess Miyabi too, but the talisman had fallen to the ground and they had picked it up. While Hiruko could possess others using this method, there was a downside. It would forcibly take over the person's body. The resolution office had used this technique to control the pharmacy assistant as a puppet, forcing Hiruko's summon when Miyabi and the others went to meet the IT guru. Additionally, Hiruko could access all the memories of the person he possessed. The discrepancy in the information from Hiruko and the IT guru proved that they were not the same individual. At this moment, Toyotama stepped forward and used her abilities according to the plan, aiming to control the IT guru. However, he was exceptionally well prepared. He had already figured out the weaknesses of every member of the resolution office. For instance, Toyotama's ability only worked if she saw a person's face. Anticipating this, he had arranged for a group of masked enforcers, completely suppressing her. Toyotama was rendered powerless, her suffocation technique useless. She was reduced to a fragile girl and was defeated in just one round, collapsing to the ground. Miyabi was instantly left without support. The hidden delivery guy couldn't bear to abandon his comrades. Instead of using his explosives, he charged in without hesitation. But how could two people possibly stand a chance against many? In the end, all three were captured by the IT guru. The IT guru immediately reported to Hiruko. The selection of the new god could begin. Meanwhile, Amino, upon learning of Miyabi's capture, rushed to the police station to ask the chief for help. However, the female officer Nino informed her that the chief was handling another case. Nino stated that it was because the gods allowed it that humans had become so reckless. Amino was left utterly stunned. It was clear that Nino was also a follower of Hiruko. The mole was the very person who had first pointed out the presence of a mole. Nino believed that only a new god could turn the situation around. Following her gaze, Amino looked out the window. Outside, rivers of blood flowed everywhere. This was the IT guru's ability. Using big data networks, he had manipulated human thoughts, embedding high-frequency sound waves that induced suicidal tendencies into the junk information sent to everyone. In an instant, the real world turned into a living hell. Amino was horrified by the sight. She struggled to stay conscious, but Nino urged her to stop resisting. Before she could react, Nino placed a talisman on her. At that moment, Amino also became possessed by Hiruko. Mass suicides erupted, and the police station descended into chaos. The resolution office, accused of colluding with Hiruko, had its office sealed off and the chief was imprisoned. The situation was so dire that it seemed like there was no hope for the world. Miyabi and the others regained consciousness only to find themselves prisoners. The IT guru, looking at the captured gods before him, could not hide his satisfaction. In this battle between gods and humans, the gods had suffered a crushing defeat. Miyabi realized he hadn't been soul harvested, confirming that the IT guru was not actually Hiruko. The IT guru readily admitted that he was the first human chosen by Hiruko. Initially, he hadn't believed in the existence of gods, but after witnessing their powers, he gradually accepted the truth. Hiruko promised him that once the gods disappeared, he would rule the world, which had only fueled his lust for power. From that day on, the IT guru devoted himself to hunting down gods for Hiruko, who would then harvest their souls one by one. When Hiruko extracted memories from the moon goddess during her disappearance, he learned about the resolution office. The IT guru, through data analysis, identified Amino as the summoner of the gods. To sever the gods' connections, Hiruko disguised himself as Katada and lured Amino in, successfully taking control of her. After hearing all of this, Miyabi asked why Hiruko was so obsessed with developing an elixir of immortality. Instead of answering, the IT guru took the three of them to an auditorium. The moment the lights came on, thunderous applause erupted from the audience. The people present were those selected by the IT guru, humans who would become the new gods. Those who didn't spend time online consuming junk information had escaped the sound wave attacks. These were the chosen candidates. All they had to do next was consume the elixir of immortality to become true gods. But before that, they would witness the soul-extracting ritual of Miyabi and the others, the long-awaited moment of Hiruko's appearance. What Miyabi and the others didn't expect was that the person who arrived was Nino. Earlier, after possessing Ameno, Hiruko had now returned using the identity of his follower, Nino. In front of everyone, Nino stepped onto the stage, but instead of immediately acting against the resolution office, she first made the humans consume the elixir of immortality. Once everyone had taken it, she requested to speak with Miyabi alone. The IT guru sensed something was wrong. He stepped forward, lifted her hair, and confirmed that Nino was nothing more than a puppet. Gathering his courage, he demanded to know why Hiruko refused to reveal himself. Instead of an answer, he suddenly coughed up blood. So did the entire audience. At that moment, he realized that Hiruko had been using him all along. Enraged, the IT guru fired a shot at Nino, but it wasn't fatal. Nino, struggling to her stinky feet, attempted to place a talisman on Miyabi to take him away. At the crucial moment, the chief arrived with reinforcements from the Resolution Office's Kyoto division, including the gods of water and fire, instantly leveling the battlefield. After a fierce battle, Miyabi and the others were successfully rescued. However, before collapsing, Nino played a video that once again sent a chill down Miyabi's spine. Ameno was captured by Hiruko and was now locked in the Resolution Office. Miyabi rushed there as quickly as he could. The reviewing officer had been waiting for him, and there was a talisman pressed to his neck, marking that he too had been possessed. Upon seeing Miyabi, the officer ordered him to place a talisman on himself, claiming he would take him to meet the real Hiruko. But Miyabi responded, calling him a liar, stating that while he wasn't a god, he wasn't an ordinary human either. Since learning that Hiruko intended to eliminate him, the god of death, Miyabi had suspected that Hiruko might not actually be a god. 1,000 years ago, there was a human named Yaku who, through years of study and hard practice, mastered the art of soul extracting. It wasn't entirely impossible for Yaku, who knew the soul extracting technique, to have lived into the modern age. Since Hiruko discovered he was the god of death, the only person around him whose good intentions had diminished was the reviewing officer. Taking advantage of his proximity, Miyabi secretly placed a strand of dog god's hair on him, hoping to confirm whether he was indeed Yaku. Ancient texts mentioned that those who consumed mermaid flesh to gain immortality were immune to the curse of gluttony. Time passed, and the reviewing officer showed no sign of aging, which confirmed Miyabi's suspicions. When his true identity was revealed, Yaku couldn't help but admire the god's intelligence, though he despised it deeply. With the rapid development of technology, humanity was no longer as pure and good as before. They had become greedy and arrogant. However, the gods returned good for evil, continuing to protect them, even after being hurt 1,000 times. This saddened Yaku. Moreover, eating mermaid flesh didn't guarantee immortality, it just prolonged life for a bit. As he sensed his own life nearing its end, his only concern was the foolish world he had to leave behind. That was why he had planned this conspiracy, to eliminate the god of death and rid the world of all gods, allowing Hiruko, who was really him, to become the sole savior and repair the world, restoring order. Yaku believed that Miyabi, as the god of death, would understand his motives, as he had long been used to the darkness and evil of humans. But Miyabi shot back, stating that even if humans were undeserving of protection, he would still protect them. Though Miyabi often claimed that humans weren't worth trusting, it was his duty. Every time he saved someone, he gave it his all. The conversation was tense, but Yaku didn't budge. He turned to attack Ameno. In that moment, she kicked the divine artifact out of his hand. Miyabi tried to move to help, but Yaku, powerful in magic, grabbed him by the neck. Confident of his victory, Yaku also planned to strike a psychological blow. It turned out Ameno had already realized that Miyabi was the god of death long before, though she had never told anyone. That night, when Yaku controlled Katachi to stab Ameno with a divine artifact, Ameno had wanted to use the summoning bell to call Miyabi, but Yaku acted too quickly. As he was about to use a talisman to probe her memories, Ameno, in order to protect Miyabi's secret, extracted her own soul before he could. Soul extracting oneself was irreversible, and by doing this, Ameno's divine essence was permanently extinguished. Miyabi was devastated when he learned the truth, feeling deep guilt. The two had made a promise to protect each other, and Ameno had kept it first. In the blink of an eye, Yaku placed a talisman on Miyabi, ready to extract his soul. Ameno, her hands and feet bound, could only helplessly watch the tragedy unfold. At the critical moment, the police chief arrived and and interrupted the ritual. He had come to investigate the resolution office, but to his surprise, found himself in the middle of a major scene. Yaku quickly switched to his usual face and manipulated Miyabi into claiming he was the true killer of the moon goddess, trying to trick the chief into arresting him. He outright accused the resolution office of being an evil cult, with all its members impersonating gods. Just as the chief was processing this, Yaku was shot in the arm. The chief had never doubted the moon goddess's identity. He was a man of integrity. His arrival gave Ameno the time she needed, and when Miyabi had kicked over the divine artifact earlier, the summoning bell had fallen out. Though it no longer had divine power, Ameno was determined to try using it. With her heartfelt call, Miyabi's rational mind began to awaken. Using his own strength, he tore the talisman off. Then, working together with the chief, they successfully subdued Yaku. When they rescued Ameno, Miyabi finally apologized to her. He had always felt guilty for not being able to save her before. That night, he had heard the summoning bell, but he had arrived too late. And as Miyabi regained his senses, it wasn't the bell that did it. Ameno was still human, which hinted that it was the power of love that had saved him. With Yaku's capture, the case that had been under investigation for nearly a year was finally solved. Thanks to the government's strong guidance, the public stopped using the IT guru's social platform, and the suicide rate sharply decreased. Society returned to its former calm. According to regulations, the resolution office had to erase the memories of everyone who knew of the god's existence, and Ameno, being an ordinary human, was no exception. This meant that she would forget Miyabi and the very existence of the resolution office. Amid the heartfelt farewells, Miyabi performed the ritual for her. Afterward, Ameno returned to the human world and continued her work as a police officer. One day on the street, she and Miyabi passed by each other without a word, as though neither of them remembered the other. But as she walked away, Ameno pulled out the summoning bell, gazing at it with a satisfied smile. Perhaps it was the god's blessing, or perhaps it was Miyabi's little secret, but Ameno certainly hadn't forgotten him. Meanwhile, Miyabi, just like her, strode forward, both of them fulfilling their duty to protect humanity, trusting that the heavens had a plan. This pair of tacit partners would surely meet again someday. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.